So Carlos and Alex and colleagues on this call who made contributions to the special issue on Paulo Freire, Global Educator, that has come out most recently from the journal Globalisation, Societies and Education, of which I'm one of the founding editors, but also currently co-editor with Mario Novelli. And it was so wonderful to be able to see this special issue take root and begin to flourish, and now it's out there speaking to the wider world. Alex, I'm wondering, can you give us a little bit of a background to the Paulo Freire event and the wider work of CLAREC that you might be able to also enlighten us a little bit on, and in that way we'll be able to have a bit of a sense of what the history of this venture and adventure has been.
Okay. Hi everyone. The idea of this special edition arose during the celebration of the centenary of Paulo Freire's birth, and the collaborations and relationships that evolved from an initiative that took place at the University of Cambridge in 2021. Just a year early, in 2020, a group of students that me, Rocío, Paula, and Juliana are part, doctor students and master students at the Faculty of Education, Cambridge, formed a collective with the aim of creating a dedicated space to promote Latin America perspective at that institution. So this collective that we call CLAREC brought together students and researchers working in Latin American contexts. So we saw it was a very timely to promote a series of academic and cultural initiatives, activities to stimulate discussions around Freire's work. So this celebration in Cambridge was collaborative effort, involved not only members of our collective, but also the Faculty of Education community, or the collectives and social movements. The three editors, as you said, Susan, of this special issue, you, Carlos, and I were involved in this initiative. So in the introduction of this special edition, we tell a bit more about this story.
It's wonderful, Alex, and it was then such an honor to be able to host Carlos. I'm sure no one needs to introduce Carlos, but let me just say this, that Carlos, much of your life's work has been an ongoing series of engagements in very productive, very personal, but also very creative ways. Can you say something from your point of view, Carlos, about Freire's kind of legacy and what you think yourself, what his legacy is?
Thank you, Susan. It's our pleasure to be here. It was a pleasure to collaborate in this project. One day I asked Paulo, and I said to him in one of my many interviews, he always said that I was the one that interviewed him the most over his lifetime. I asked him, how do you want to be remembered? And he was very specific. He said, as somebody who lived, loved, and wanted to know. And I found that a very consistent Freirean statement. Now, my take on Freire is that he was really a pioneer from Latin America, and a pioneer epistemologically, and a pioneer in methodological terms. What do I mean by a pioneer? until Freire and many other people that came up in Latin America with a critique of the dominance of the Anglo-Saxon science, we didn't have many people who symbolize alternative. And the alternative that he symbolized is not only with pedagogy of the oppressed, but also with the question of this epistemological concept that every social relationships involves a model of domination and oppression. Then the other element that I think it was crucial in his career and in his contribution was on models of research, methods of research, or participatory action research. And I think he is one of the great contributors to this model of participatory action research, which had already been initiated to some extent by the same time in Tanzania, with the presence of some Norwegian researchers and so on. But Freire, actually, they gave a different perspective. Having said that, I think that Freire, how I remember Freire and what I think Freire needs to be considered. Number one, I think, is that from as analytical or scholarship model, Freire was somebody who matched the reputation and contributions of somebody like Dewey. In that regard, gave us an alternative to a traditional Anglo-Saxon model. In addition to that, he gave people a language. When you really look at the conversation about politicity in Freire, or if you really look at how you connect the different models of epistemology that he was trying to confront, etc., he gave people a language to express feelings of trying to avoid a culture of silence, but also, in addition to that, a framework which was pretty close to the UNESCO humanistic framework, but it was in itself a very different perspective. At the level of image, he was a kind of a prophet of social transformation. He has a face of a prophet. He got absolutely overtaken by the moment of speaking with people, to people, in a short, small group or in a large group. So I think that element of prophecy he actually used in his writings, and I concluded my book, my main book on Freire with that sentence was about who are the prophets. And I think it really inspirational. But then at another level, we'll say the intimacy of knowledge. He connected with people in ways that I didn't see before. And I've been in this business for more than 4 decades. And my last comment will be his actual, no, I wouldn't say humility, but respect. I think Freire was somebody who showed that when we teach, we have to have respect for our students.
That's a wonderful legacy. And I think, Carlos, thinking about lived, loved, and wanted to know, actually, if we can draw that forward into the contemporary moment, with all the turbulence in the world, that in fact some of those sentiments would go some distance to enabling us to hear each other. Can I turn over to you, Rocío? You've got a wonderful paper, and you pick up a particular concept in your paper around politicity. So just tell us what kind of insight does that kind of concept from Freire kind of give you and give the reader, potentially, to help us, really make that strong claim around Freire as global educator?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very interesting question because politicity appears throughout most of Freire's work. As Carlos just said, like it's a central concept of his work, but it wasn't necessarily as developed, at least not explicitly from the Freirean tradition as much as other concepts. But I argue that politicity can actually offer many insights because it's basically asking where does our political condition and the political nature of education comes from, like concretely, right? Epistemologically and ontologically. So this implies to go beyond the moral and value-oriented claims. And this is not to say that these claims are not relevant or that we shouldn't be making them, on the contrary, but it's about looking further beyond. And basically, it's looking to the essence of what being humans is about. It has to do with our relation as humans to the world in its structural, cultural, and agential dimensions. And this relation is basically mutually constitutive and in constant motion. So it involves ideas, it involves imaginaries, which is something I pay particular attention in the paper. And throughout the paper, I argue that this imaginative exercise of envisioning new realities, for example, during the strike processes, is also an echo of our own positionality. So it actually helps us to understand what are the structures, what are the culture in which we are situated in concrete, where we are part of, and therefore under which change can take place or not. What are the possibilities, what are the particular limits of change, and how we can, as agents, how we can overcome them.
And I can see, you pushing people back into also reading more systematically the work of Freire. Paula, can we go over to you? And you work with your colleague Leila, and you had two kind of concerns that you were bringing together. One, a historic concern around the quality of teachers and so on, and then the possibilities of using things like lesson study and so on. Can you just share with us a little bit something of the process of working with another colleague, but also what you think the key conclusions in your paper were?
When I first got to know lesson study, which is a methodology that enables teacher to go deeper on their tacit knowledge or things that they don't know, they know, and they practice, it reminded me immediately of some of key concepts of Paulo Freire, especially the dialogicity and the consciousness of reality. So I first started working with this methodology because I understand is one of the approaches that will best link elements that will really draw into teachers' learning from a different perspective, different from what is traditionally known in education. And because I believe that teachers are the main element if we want to improve, change any educational system. And
that's beautifully put. That's beautifully put. And that sense, the idea of amorosity, I think, is so important. Shall I go across to you, Juliana, because you've done a wonderful paper where you're taking some of the work around the theatre of the oppressed, which was stimulated by Freire's lenses. Can you talk to us about what that paper looks like? So if we were to read the paper, what are you talking about in this paper? What are you exploring?
I'm exploring how we can use theater as a tool for social change. And then today I would like to also go through the perspective of public pedagogy, because I also talk about this. And then if we think about the public pedagogy, if it refers to educational practice that extend beyond educational settings, I explored applied theater, which also goes beyond the formal theatrical settings, keeping in mind Freire's concept of educational as a tool to question and change realities. So for illustrate that, I used the work of Estopou Balaio. This is a Brazilian theater group. They had collaborated with a neighborhood in Brazil for over 10 years, using memory and narrative as pedagogical tools.
A beautiful piece too, and I was really taken when I was reading it. Alex, and Carlos, some of our colleagues are not on this on this kind of call, as it were. And do you want to say one or two things, Alex, about the many of the pieces? It's the many open access. So back to you, Alex.
Thank you, Susan. The special issue is now available on the journal's website, as described on the screen. It's a collection of 12 papers, including the introduction, with half of them being open access. The first article is an inspiring contribution by Carlos titled Paulo Freire, a thinker of praxis, an itinerant thinker, a universal thinker. Following that, Peter Mayo portrays Freire as a global luminary in education in his test. And also, Kathryn Miller's powerful test is part of her speech as a keynote speaker at the Freire conference we have mentioned. And there is also tests by Massimiliano Tarozzi, who ventures into reinventing Freire in the Italian context, and the test is by José Beltrán-Llavador, reflect on praxis of hope. As mentioned, there's a test I wrote in collaboration with Rosana Fernandes from the MST, and the test authored by Rocío. Additionally, the concept of dialogue and critical consciousness comes to the forefront in the paper by Wen Xu and Kathryn Stahl. And as commented on here, there are also papers authored by Juliana and Paula and their respective collaborators. And this fantastic collection ends with a paper authored by 4 academic women and militants of popular education in Brazil, Joana Salem, Naiara Rosário, Tatiane Ribeiro, and Paula Maíra Cordeiro, in which they discuss popular knowledge as popular power. Over to you, Susan.
I'm wondering if, as we draw this to a close, can everyone just think of one word? There's some words that we've heard already. But if you were to put it in one word, when you think of Freire as global educator, what might that word be? Carlos, shall I go over to you, then across to Alex? Carlos, what's your one word?
Well, I will say sensei, because a sensei is a teacher to whom we have a depth that is impossible to repay.
Fantastic. Rocío, what's your one word?
I think I would say creativity, because we need to be creative in order to think about new possibilities, in order to read the world, to innovate theoretically and methodologically. And I think that's what he did most of his life. So creativity.
Juliana, what's your one word?
Democratization.
Fantastic. And to you, Paula.
Yeah, I'll think of conscientization, because what's behind is what we really need to find out. So I think it's a good one.
So it's a well-known, and it is definitely a global concept. Alex, back over to you. One word, or even you could have the one word and the last word.
I love the word inédito viável, which is untested feasibility. Is a way to guide us in possible transformations, alternatives for reality. So it's my word.
And we had other words, didn't we? Amorosity, the idea of the profit, generosity, and so on. So colleagues, we'll conclude this. So I'm just going to turn the recording